I think it's safe to say that we are very close to the end of the Wano arc. We have the last few fights being cleaned up. Basically, the biggest threat we have right now is Kaido. And while we know that Kaido is going down this arc, there's something I want to look into about Kaido before we get to that point. And that's why Kaido chose Wano. Now, we've been getting tidbits, especially with the interactions between Kaido and Yamato, that Kaido chose Wano for a very specific reason. He's not just here because, he saw a land he thought he could conquer. He has a reason for being here, he has a reason for staying here, and he has a reason for building Wano the way he's done it so far. Now, my theory on it, which I will explain further in the video, is that Kaido wants to use Wano to create a war as big as Joy Boy's. He wants to go down as someone who lived a life as grand and died as grand as Joy Boy did in his time. After all, Kaido wants to die. This is how he was introduced. This is how he has portrayed himself throughout the arc. And he's mentioned time and time again that, not only does he want to die, but death is what really makes a character. He mentioned this at Whitebeard's death. He mentioned this when he was talking to the Scabbards. The way someone dies defines their life. Now let's take it back from the beginning and kind of build up from there. We know that Kaido was an apprentice on the Rocks Pirates back some 40 years ago, back when he was around 20 years old. Now we know that Rocks was known for messing with the taboo things of the world. Generally that means Void Sentry, that means ancient weapons. I think it's safe to say that Rocks knew at least some, but probably all of the Void Sentry. He knew about the ancient weapons and he was getting ready to use that knowledge and that power to conquer the world. That was his goal, and that's why he was put down. Now, not being able to do that goal alone, he gathered strong pirates to his group. He gathered Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido. At this point in time is when Kaido learns about Joy Boy, when he learns about the ancient weapons, when he learns about the Void Sentry. This is where Kaido got that knowledge from. Because as far as we know, he doesn't have all the poneglyphs, he doesn't have people to read the poneglyphs, and he doesn't have anyone feeding him the information because so far it doesn't seem like everyone has the full scoop. So Kaido now has this somewhat broken knowledge of the Void Sentry and ancient weapons and what power they possess. And if he has any inkling of what Joy Boy went through, based on Roger's reaction, it was a very lively time. Whatever Joy Boy did, whatever amazing feats Joy Boy had and were recorded posthumously for everyone to know, Kaido would want that, especially if he wants to die a grand death. Now, what would be the easiest way to fill in the missing pieces, to kind of close those gaps that he couldn't quite fill in while being on the Rocks Pirates? The easiest way is to go to Wano. This is the place where they learn to make the poneglyphs. This is where they etch the history of the world. The fact that they have this knowledge and were able to write it down means that Wano has a connection to ancient weapons and the Void Sentry. They at least know what happened, whether or not they're a part of it, they know the history. So say Kaido goes to Wano and takes over. He starts making deals, he meets up with Orochi, and basically they conquer Wano. But at this point in time, there's probably no one who still has the ancient art of writing and reading poneglyphs. Basically, that art has died out, and there's no one they can use to inscribe the ancient history. However, there's a rumor that exists that says in 20 years, people will return from the past, and they will fight for Wano. Who are these people? People that might have an idea on how to transcribe poneglyphs. Not only that, but he is currently in the land of Wano. Basically, if there's going to be any place that can either, uncover the ancient history, relearn the skills and techniques needed to transcribe poneglyphs, it's going to be in Wano. So he takes over. And for this, you can kind of think about how Blackbeard does things. Basically, he existed on Whitebeard's crew for 40 years because he thought that was the closest way to get to his goal. For Kaido, staying in Wano for 20 years, that's not that big of a deal if it means he's going to achieve his dream. And all the while he occupies Wano, he can still go out and explore other venues. He could still look for, the ancient writing. He can still look for hints of Joy Boy in other places. He can just come back to Wano when he wants and make sure he assumes control. And it's not necessarily just speculation because we see in Wano right now that Kaido's interests lie outside of just dying. When he sees Momo and Kanjuro after 20 years, basically hasn't seen them since he took over the castle, the first thing he asks about that is, did Odin share any secrets? Was there anything that Odin passed down that you guys might know now? Basically, he's scouting for information. Now, I doubt he just wants to hear about Odin's journey. I think he wants to hear the missing parts of the Void Sentry, because we know for a fact that Odin knows the full thing. Odin and the rest of the Roger Pirates went there and they figured out the entire history. So whatever Odin has in the journal, whatever Odin passes down, is the entire de facto truth. We also hear from Black Maria that they are looking specifically for Robin because she has the ability to read poneglyphs, and that they're not going to kill her outright because they need her for something. Now, if Kaido was just trying to die, he really wouldn't need the poneglyphs. And we also know that he's not really hunting for One Piece because that's kind of what Big Mom is doing. Her goal is to be Pirate King and have the One Piece. And Kaido knows this. Kaido has mentioned that, it's not time to show your true colors yet, so he knows what Big Mom's up to, but that doesn't bother him at all. Meaning, while their goals are down the same path, it's not the same thing. He wants the war that will be triggered by finding One Piece. He doesn't want One Piece. And as things are now, a lot of his pieces are fitting together. So he has a poneglyph here. He has Robin who can read poneglyphs. He has the Kozuki family and basically some dregs from 20 years in the past. So he's getting all these pieces and elements together, and he should be able to enact his plan. Him and Big Mom also mentioned that they're going to use the ancient weapons to pretty much engage in war on the world government, especially because they created the SSG and they feel like they can take over. So what would Kaido get from all of this planning? What would Kaido get from finally deciphering the poneglyphs, finding the One Piece, finding the ancient weapons? Well, if you look back at what Whitebeard said, basically when someone finds the One Piece, a war will break out. It will not be peaceful after that. So one, we know that when someone finds a treasure, say when Luffy finds it, there's going to be a war after that. But that also indicates that the knowledge and what you would find when you find One Piece is enough to start a war like that. And since we know the ancient weapons are kind of a part of One Piece, maybe not necessarily tied together, but we know they go hand in hand, Kaido is basically trying to kickstart this. He's saying if we get the ancient weapons, if we go forth and find One Piece, we can kickstart this war. And now we know that Kaido wants to start a war. He wants to start the biggest war the world has ever seen. And it's not just that he wants to die in the spectacular war, but if you think about it, if he dies like Joy Boy, he can have his name written in the poneglyphs. In his pocket right now, he has Momo, who may get the ability to write on the poneglyphs. We have Robin, who can read poneglyphs. We have Wano, where they are created. Basically, we have all these elements tying together that are saying, okay, at this point in time, people can write about Kaido. People can pass down Kaido's story just like they did Joy Boy's. And that would be most fitting for Kaido, a man who wants a spectacular death, one that's never forgotten. And it's not only in death that Kaido will be remembered, but it's the legacy that continues forth with Yamato. Because if you think about it, if Yamato becomes shogun, if Yamato has the Devil Fruit ability, if Yamato has the power to rule over Wano, not only does Kaido's name and legacy live on through the poneglyphs, it would live on through his child. And this is a major thing that people strive for. When they want to leave behind something great, they want to leave behind a legacy. They want something that not only lives on in thoughts and minds, but lives on physically. And Yamato is basically the personification of that. If Yamato lives on as shogun, if Yamato does as Kaido says, and basically becomes this ruler that Kaido wants Yamato to be, then that just continues on his legacy. Even now, Yamato is called the Oni Princess. All of Yamato's moves are basically mirrors of Kaido's moves. We already have the similarities, the mirrors, the lookalikes. It's all there, it's just the fact that Yamato doesn't want to do it. That's the only thing that's kind of keeping Kaido's legacy from being passed down like this, is that Yamato wants to be Odin instead. And the final idea to kind of wrap this all together is the fact that Kaido told Luffy that he could not be Joy Boy either. Now, what does this mean? Why is he telling Luffy that? My guess is that Kaido knows he's not the one to start the war the way Joy Boy did. And I think what he wanted was Yamato to be that person. He wanted Yamato to be the Joy Boy that started this war. He saw potential, he saw conquerors, he saw, his offspring, but yet Yamato wanted to be Odin, and now that kind of ruins things. So now we have Luffy here who has similar potential, similar ability, and Kaido takes him out. And Kaido says, well, I guess you're not going to be it either. So I think that last piece is that Kaido is looking for the Joy Boy to start his war. And once he finds that Joy Boy, that's when everything kind of runs in line. And that's also what I'm saying, that he has all the pieces here, because pretty much everything is in Wano right now for the war to start. It just has to be brought together. As we get more and more chapters with Kaido and even with Yamato here, I love seeing more backstory. I really want to know what Kaido's about, and I mentioned this in like a lot of my chapter reviews, is that Kaido is so fascinating to me as a villain, as an antagonist, because we started out with this idea that he was such a muscle-headed, I want to die type character. Not much else drives him, but wanting to die and wanting a good fight. But with each, little tidbit we get, it just seems like there's so much depth to what he's been doing, what he's doing now, what he wants to do, that it extends way beyond just him wanting to die, and it becomes something more grand. Of course, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to put a poll in this one as well, so check that description, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.